So by introduction, my name's Keely Wilkinson. I work in both the evidence-based practice team and also the professional standards and behaviour team in HPPS. So my role is about embedding evidence into improving professional standards and behaviour. I'm a chartered research psychologist by background, and I've worked doing kind of research in criminal justice service for about 10 years now. So in terms of this event, obviously it's having difficult conversations. So this is about what the evidence tells us makes having a kind of successful difficult conversation. I am going to be recording this meeting. I did say as people were joining, so just to reiterate, if you're staying on the call, that means you're kind of consenting to being recorded today. Obviously, if you're not speaking, if you could go on mute, that would be really helpful for me, because obviously it's really distracting if I can hear other conversations going on. I will share the slides with the Insights team as well, so hopefully they can send these out to you after the event. And I think there should be some space at the end for questions. It's just me, so there's no one kind of monitoring the chat for me or anything. So feel free to put stuff in there. I will do my best to keep an eye on it. And obviously, raise your hand if you want to, but I might not be able to kind of get to it straight away because I might not see your hand go up or anything. So hopefully everyone's okay with all of that, and I will get started. So to just give you a bit of a background as to kind of where this work has come from. So this was a piece of work that I was involved in a little while ago from the evidence-based practice team, when I was actually involved in conducting an evaluation around the use of force in English and Welsh prisons. And that was alongside the kind of rollout of Parva incapacitance spray in the male estate. And as part of that research team, we had access to body-worn video camera footage and some incident reports from use of force. And through those kind of that material, we were able to kind of see that sometimes, not always, obviously, but there were occasions where use of force was kind of incidents arising from situations where staff might need to be kind of delivering a bit of a difficult conversation to someone in prison. So, things like adjudication outcomes or cancelled visits or whatever it might be. And so we wondered whether it might actually be helpful to kind of look and see if there was a way of providing some additional support for staff to have these difficult conversations. So I had a look at the evidence base around this and identified some kind of key features that, if followed, are more likely to lead to kind of successful difficult conversations. And it became sort of quite apparent through speaking with colleagues across the organisation that actually there's lots of times and lots of scenarios where we might need to be having a difficult conversation, with the people that are in our care in prisons and on probation, but also our colleagues who we work with, our line managers, and also the people that we manage. So it was felt that this guidance would actually be useful for many people across the business, and that led to the development of lots of different evidence-based resources. One of which is a full-day training event, which this 1 hour workshop is based on. Obviously, it's not as long as a full-day training event, but that event goes through the tips that I'm going to go through today in a lot more detail with some additional information as well. And it also fundamentally, the main difference is that it gives participants the opportunity to practice those skills as well. So just time for a little bit of audience participation if you're up for it. So if you're happy to contribute, you can either kind of be brave and come on camera and tell me, or you could just put it into the chat. But what is it that kind of makes some conversations feel a bit more challenging than others? Yeah, bad news. Teresa, do you want to come in?
Sorry, just on. Hi, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, can hear you. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you for being brave.
That's all right. Sorry. Yeah, I think conversations that I found difficult is where I'm having to say something that is perhaps going to be immediately interpreted as negative.
Yeah,
Um, so, I think to like performance related issues that I've had with staff over the years.
yeah,
And from my perspective, my intention is always to be supportive to, kind of enable them to achieve what it is they need to achieve in order to be, meeting their objectives.
yeah,
Um, but as soon as they are kind of seeing where it's going, it's immediate on like the defensive, and I don't know how much of
yeah,
that is what I've said and how much is a choice that we make as people to defend ourselves, no matter, do you know what I mean?
yeah,
So
yeah,
I know as
absolutely.
a consequence of being a manager of a large team, not presently, but in the past I've managed, 12 up to 20, 25, 30 people at times. Um, if my senior managers have ever had conversations about what they think about my work, I intentionally don't try and defend. I look at what they're trying to say and not exactly what they're saying and how they're saying it. Do I still feel supported in that
Yeah,
conversation, or do I feel bullied in that conversation? And if I'm feeling supported, so I always go in with that thing of being the taking an example from good senior leaders and having the similar. But yeah, it's always that those are hard. Or when you have to say something that is is hard to say for another reason.
mm,
Like, oh, some people when they're leaving jobs, they find that hard to say, oh, I'm looking for jobs somewhere else now. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've had staff in the past come in, and it's clearly hard for them to have that conversation with me
yeah,
that they're
yeah.
looking. Yeah, so anyway, that was my thought.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing, Teresa. That's really helpful. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Kind of the response that you get, and you automatically kind of feel quite defensive yourself as well, don't you? That's really normal. I can see lots of people putting stuff in the chat, but yeah, a lot of the content sometimes is very challenging, isn't it? Other people's temperament. Yeah, absolutely. I can see Danielle, you talking about someone above you, if you're speaking to a line manager or a senior person, that's always more challenging. Yeah, some of the characteristics of people are kind of different to the rest of us. Yeah, absolutely. I anticipate other person might be upset. Yeah, all of those things can make it feel really, really challenging. So yeah, I completely agree with everything that's been said there. So if we kind of keep going, so the next question is how does having a difficult conversation make you feel? What kind of feelings, and or kind of physical symptoms do we get when we know we have to have a difficult conversation? Yeah, thanks. See some comments in the chat. Yeah, nervous, anxious, tense, stressed. Richard, do you want to come in?
Yeah, hi. Sure. Yeah. No, I was
Hi.
just going to say, nervous and anxious, but I think probably also focused on too much on whether that's going to be kind of not a watershed moment, but something that gets remembered, like if you don't handle it well and gets
Yeah,
referred back
absolutely.
to. So I think always not wanting that to be a defining moment, that if you have that conversation with whoever it is, that it shapes your relationship with them and others, going forwards after that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually not one that has come up before when I've been doing this, and I've done this quite a few times. So yeah, it's a really, really it's nice to hear something new. But yeah, it's a really good point. You don't want to be kind of defined by how you've handled something, do you? So yeah, great. Yeah, stressful, fear of repercussions. Yeah. Oh, relief afterwards. Yeah, that's a nice point that Rosie made. Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. Okay. And then if we think about how we manage these things, so what do you do currently if we are feeling, all those kind of things that we were talking about there, stressed and anxious and worried and apprehensive? What kind of things are we doing currently to handle those? being prepared. That's a good one. Take time out, go for a run. Brilliant. Make be ready for it. Brilliant. Speak to colleagues. Brilliant. Yeah. Breathing exercises. Fantastic. Thinking about the consequences. Brilliant. Yeah. So there's lots of ways that we can manage having these conversations, and actually there are several kind of key psychological techniques that are supported in evidence that we can use to kind of either sort of decrease our experience of stress or kind of protect us from the impacts of it. And these techniques kind of help reduce the kind of physiological impact of stress on both the body and the brain. You know, obviously we know that stress has a physical impact as well as a psychological one. And that's either these techniques either kind of interrupt that by sort of changing the way that we kind of interpret potential threats, or by kind of increasing our experience of positive emotions, which then can help us kind of reduce the stress response. So I don't actually have time, unfortunately, to go through all of these, but evidence-based practice team has got a lot of resources around this in general, about kind of resilience and well-being, which I can absolutely share links to if anyone's interested. One of which is this infographic, and it's a lot longer than is just on this screen, so there are a lot more to this, but I can kind of pick out a handful to kind of illustrate for you. So labeling emotions is one that you can see there on the screen. So this is about kind of literally just naming the emotion that you're feeling, and that it sounds kind of a little bit strange, but what that does is it can help you feel a bit more rational and kind of bring what you're feeling in line with what you're thinking. So labeling works by activating the kind of more sophisticated part of your brain, which you might know as the prefrontal cortex. And that kind of reduces the activity in the part of your brain that kind of then responds to the perceived threat. So obviously, you know, if we think about during a difficult conversation, we can name the emotion that we're feeling kind of before, even during and after emotion in that conversation, to kind of help us to rationalize what we're experiencing. Another one that we can use is generating positive emotions. So I think a couple of you mentioned things like, you know, going for a run and things like that. So if we can kind of increase our experience of a positive emotion, things like gratitude and is really critical to resilience, and that can influence your response to adversity. And those emotions kind of disrupt the experience of stress, and that helps us kind of recover a lot more effectively. So yeah, going for a run, engaging, watching a favorite film, a fun activity that we enjoy doing, even just looking at a photograph of somebody that we love, can really generate that positive emotion. Another one I think that was mentioned in the chat as well is breathing. Breathing is actually the fastest and most direct way to change our physiology, and it affects and to affect our kind of automatic nervous system, which is the system that's responsible for your fight, flight, or freeze response to threat. So to be able to kind of achieve a more calm state, you need to calm your sympathetic response, which is that fight or flight, and increase your parasympathetic response, which kind of slows you down. And that can be achieved really directly through regulation of your breathing. And there's, you know, lots of techniques I'm sure people are aware of. So it's like box breathing, belly breathing, even like alternate nostril breathing. So you close one and you exhale through the other, and then you switch. But even activities like yoga, walking, running, meditation, mindfulness, singing are all other ways to kind of access that kind of breathing as well. So help you regulate your breathing and kind of use that as a way to manage stress. And then the final one that I'll just pick up on, because it's related to something that we do as part of difficult conversations, is creating behavioral intentions. And this is based on a theory of reasoned actions, which is kind of one of the best supported theories around behavior. And it says that creating behavioral intentions, so being really clear about what it is you want to achieve and what you need to do to get there, helps you become much better at transforming those intentions into actions, and then keeps you focused on the task at hand. It also increases your sense of self efficacy, so your belief in your ability to achieve the goals that you set for yourself, and that's strongly related to well-being. So obviously I'll come on to how that's going to relate to this in time, but obviously that, like, really kind of being really clear about what we want to achieve as part of a difficult conversation can be really helpful to kind of managing our stress. So I'm going to kind of come on to talking about the tips around navigating difficult conversations now. So the first we've kind of grouped these tips into kind of three sections. So prepare, connect, and then resolve. So the first set of tips have been categorized under the headline of prepare. And that's because, obviously, as the name suggests, it's everything we want to do, to consider and do before we participate in a difficult conversation. So obviously everything that I've put there on the slide is the kind of things that we want to consider as part of the first part of this, which is the setting. So ideally we want the conversation to take place at somewhere that's private and quiet. And if we can, we want to try and make the environment as neutral as possible to both participants. So somewhere like a meeting room is kind of more neutral than your office, for example, or even if it is appropriate, if you can do it, somewhere like a local park or a cafe or an outside space, that also can be quite a neutral environment to be doing that. And obviously that depends on how appropriate it is for the message that you're giving. So what you're trying to do is neutralize that perception of a power imbalance between you and the other person. So obviously if you're doing it in your office, then obviously the power kind of sits with you in that situation. So yeah, it's keeping it in mind. Now, sometimes it isn't always possible to find a completely neutral space. Sometimes the only space available is your office or something like that. So if this is the case, just think about what else you could do to kind of maybe minimize that potential power imbalance. So can you sit in a way that feels more collaborative? Can you sit alongside each other or at a table rather than, kind of you over a desk and the other person sat on the other side? The other thing is, obviously it's not always easy to do, but kind of minimizing distractions, and also giving yourself enough time to have the conversation. So you want to make sure that both people have time to kind of discuss their thoughts and feelings and not feel rushed through the situation. So basically you want that environment to be one where all of the participants of the conversation feel that they will be treated equally and fairly. Obviously there's times when this is going to be difficult, but if we can bear these in mind and find the most suitable kind of setting that we can, or even just consider postponing the conversation until you can find an appropriate setting. Just the point on the last bit there about the online versus in person. Now, obviously, a lot of conversations nowadays will take place online. There's things to consider if it is the case that you have to take it have to do it online. So as above, that both parties need to be not going to be disturbed, so that minimize those distractions, make sure it's kind of as private as possible, and that enough time is being scheduled. What's unique to a kind of online meeting is that we have quite little control of the environment of the other person in this case. So we can't necessarily tell if there are other people around that can overhear or impact on confidentiality, or, if it's a difficult subject matter, is there someone with that person that will be able to support them if they get upset. So it's worth, if you have to have those conversations online, it's worth considering putting in place what you might need to have. So, making sure that someone's in a separate room, or they have headphones, or they, you have your camera on, or even just consider delaying that until you might be able to speak in person. So yeah, all these things are worth considering. So as I just discussed about kind of setting behavioural intentions, the next step is about being clear about what our outcome is and what we want to achieve to keep us staying focused. So before we initiate the conversation, ask yourself what it is you want to achieve from it. What's the outcome you want to see happen? And if we're really clear about the purpose of the conversation, as we're going into it, we're less likely to get sidetracked. It's also worth, as part of this, considering what support you can put in place to help that person achieve the outcome that you want. And also, if possible, now it's not always the case that you can offer a compromise, but if you can, what are those compromises that you're willing to make in order to kind of achieve an outcome which will suit everyone? The next step in this section then is around facts. So it's important to go into the conversation having gathered all the relevant facts so that you have the information you need before being in the middle of the conversation. So try and understand the situation from as many vantage points as possible, and anyone the situation might be impacting, but also the person that you're having the conversation with. Think of this as kind of like your evidence gathering. So, what can you obtain to give you a full picture of what might be happening in this situation? So that might, depending on what this conversation is about, that might include things like BILAT notes, meeting minutes, attendance records, policies, whatever it might be that is useful to you to have on hand. It's also probably worth considering around this point occupational health information that you might need to be aware of in advance if appropriate. So there might be a range of factors you need to consider, such as kind of recent bereavement, mental health difficulties, disabilities, neurodiversity, trauma, and so on. And not having this information or not preparing for how you might consider this could then have a detrimental impact on the person that was completely unintended by you. As much as possible here as well, you want to try and keep your emotions separate from the facts. Now, obviously, that's really not always that easy to do, especially if you're, being directly impacted by something. But being clear about the facts of the situation will kind of ensure that neutrality when you go into the conversation. And if you find that you are feeling quite emotional about the situation, think about whether you could have that conversation at a later point when you are feeling calmer. Okay, and then the last part of the kind of prepare stage is stay on track. So this obviously it isn't possible to kind of anticipate everything, but it can be really helpful to think about anything which might derail the conversation, and therefore consider anything that you might be able to do to bring it back on track. So this might, example of this might be that someone that you are having a conversation with has a particular behavior or something that you find challenging. For example, I had to have a conversation with someone a little while ago, and they're just sort of known for interrupting, and I found that quite challenging. So, kind of knowing that I would be affected by that kind of made me think, okay, what am I going to do if that happens as well? So you're kind of anticipating what might derail you. It's also a good idea to kind of think about the person that you're having the conversation with. So how might they respond to you? What's your relationship like with them? And also what's their kind of awareness of the situation before the conversation? Are they aware of what's going on? Are they likely to know about the problem? Or is it the first time that they're going to hear about it? If they aren't aware, how might they respond to you bringing it up with them for the first time? And it's also quite helpful here to kind of think about intention. So it's really easy and it's very human to assume that someone is intending to make you feel in a certain way, but it's not necessarily their intention to make you or others feel kind of upset or angry or whatever it might be. They might not even be aware of what it is that they're doing. And we'll kind of briefly touch on biases a bit later on. And how they kind of influence our thinking. But it is helpful to have awareness that we might hold beliefs about a situation that aren't actually based in fact. So I just want to pause there in case there are any questions that I have missed. I can see a few comments in the chat. Yeah, it's a good point. Thank you for raising that about the meeting outside. Yeah, it's always usually in an office. I think sometimes it's not appropriate, so obviously, have to have that in mind. But yeah, if we can do it outside, there's nothing wrong with that, really, is there? If it's appropriate. Yeah, same about the time, difficult conversations, catch up meeting. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your points there, and that's really helpful. Any other points before I carry on? Brilliant. Okay, I will carry on then. Okay, right. So we're now moving into the next set of tips, which we've kind of grouped under the headline of Connect. And as the name kind of suggests, this is about kind of connecting with the other person, giving them the opportunity to have their voice and genuinely listening to what they have to say, and thinking about how to meaningfully engage with them in a kind of collaborative way. So the first thing we need to do is thank the other person for being part of the conversation with you and acknowledge their willingness to participate. Um, this is obviously, it feels quite obvious, but and even if it's kind of mandated conversation, they are still there, they are still participating, and it's just the respectful thing to do to kind of thank the other person. Another thing to point out, as I've mentioned previously about kind of the awareness of the situation, is that they might not necessarily understand the reason for the conversation, and that might mean that they're feeling quite nervous or anxious. So it's often helpful for people to kind of know in advance. It kind of, I've had lots of comments about whether this can be mean that people worry more, or whether they would rather know. So I guess it kind of take a view as to who it is that you're having a conversation with, but quite often just even giving them a little bit of a heads up around the kind of conversation that you're about to have can help kind of reduce those feelings of feeling nervous or anxious. So even if you don't do it in way in advance, just even saying it straight away as you're going into the meeting, being really clear as soon as possible from the outset of the conversation what it is that you're going to be talking about, rather than this kind of like fluffing around and talking around the subject. So this is a video clip that I'm hoping is going to work with the sound. So it's just a bit of a funny illustration of kind of the anxiety that sometimes having a difficult conversation might bring
Alex?
up.
Oh, hey. Are you free tomorrow morning for a quick chat? A quick chat? Yeah? Great. See you in the morning. Asking me for a quick chat without any context is like putting 5 highly caffeinated squirrels inside my head. I'm now going to anxiously overthink, catastrophize, and won't be able to do anything until I get some reassurance that my world isn't about to end.
Okay, I'm hoping that you heard that all right, and I didn't see anything come up in the chat that you didn't, but yeah, hopefully that played okay for you. I'm sure that can resonate with a lot of people feeling like that when people sort of ask for a quick chat. So yeah, I guess bearing in mind that's what might be kind of creeping into people's minds when you say when you're not overly clear from the start what their conversation is about. Okay.
Alex?
Sorry, there we go. So the next bit we want to think about is the language that we're using when we're having a conversation. So we want to avoid language which feels quite blaming or resentful. We want to kind of stay calm, speak clearly, and we want to keep a neutral tone. The other thing we want to try and do is to kind of keep things quite future focused and initiate a problem solving stance. So for example, saying things like, I want to work out how we can improve things going forward. Kind of initiate that more, I want to solve this problem and I want to work with you to do that. It can be really easy to get pulled into other directions. So as we were talking about in terms of your outcome, try and keep focused on that when you're kind of coming into kind of connecting with people. And then when you're asking questions, which we absolutely should be doing, it's a good idea to try and avoid why questions. These often result in a kind of quite defensive response. And obviously we want to be kind of working in a more collaborative way. So I think, Teresa, you mentioned about feeling quite defensive, but obviously, we can initiate that in the other person as well if we're kind of asking why questions. Now, obviously, sometimes you're going to have to ask a why question. It's not always easy to rephrase it, but wherever you can, changing those to kind of what or how questions can initiate that slightly more collaborative response. If we're sharing our views or our thoughts or feelings on a situation, it's best to use I statements. So you start the statement with I. So I'm concerned, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm finding it difficult when, rather than you're making me feel, or this is what you're doing. Again, that kind of moves away from a more blaming or resentful stance to more kind of, I'm sharing my feelings, I'm not necessarily putting it on you, but this is how I'm feeling about it. The other thing, and I think we're all kind of quite guilty of this, is that it can be quite tempting to use humour to lighten the situation, especially if we're feeling quite uncomfortable. But it can be really unhelpful for several reasons. So firstly, it might actually disrupt the rapport that you're trying to build with another person, especially if they're feeling upset. They want you to be, they want to feel that you're taking their feelings seriously, and using humor could undermine that. And also then secondly, and the use of humor could kind of weaken the message that you're trying to convey. So usually when we're having a difficult conversation, it's because of a serious situation or an important message that we're trying to get across. And using humor might undermine how that message is being received by the person, leading them to not listen or kind of not perceive the message as being important. Now, obviously, you might be have a relationship with somebody where that humor is something that you use frequently. What we would say in that situation is, obviously, when you finish that conversation and you want to go back to kind of your normal working relationship or relationship, whatever it might be, that's absolutely fine, but just make sure that when you're delivering the difficult message, that you're not using humor. So once you finish the difficult conversation, then obviously that's absolutely fine to kind of reestablish that relationship. Okay, so a key part of a successful conversation is listening to the other person. And sometimes this is actually quite hard to do when we're feeling stressed. We can kind of forget that the other person is as much a part of the conversation as we are. We're expressing our perceptions, our thoughts and feelings. So the other person has just as much right to express theirs. And anyone who's kind of familiar with procedural justice, which evidence-based practice team have got a lot of resources on, you'll recognise that this is very much about the kind of voice principle. So giving people that voice and that space to have, to give their side of the conversation. So we can do that by asking them questions. We can allow them time to discuss their thoughts and feelings. We can really understand their point of view, and we can actively demonstrate that we're listening through various different techniques. So we can use mirroring, which is where we literally reflect what we're seeing. So you seem upset, you seem worried. Is that right? What is it that's making you feel that way? Or we can also paraphrase their responses. So that's kind of literally restating what they're saying to you, but in your own words. So that really kind of shows that we're listening to somebody. Okay, and then the final part of Connect is monitoring. So as we've discussed, kind of being part of a difficult conversation can feel really stressful. So it's really important to monitor both our own and the other person's well-being throughout. It's our responsibility as the person leading the conversation to minimize any potential harm to the other individual. And equally, we want to make sure we're looking after our own well-being. And so we should monitor responses and reactions for both parties and look for times where it might be beneficial to kind of pause or rephrase something or ask more questions to check understanding. And as I was saying around the language, as much as possible, we want to try and stay calm. And this might be quite difficult to do. But if we can, it will encourage the other person to remain calm too. We can probably all recall situations where kind of strong emotions like anger have become heightened by each other as we respond and react to what's being said. So if you do notice that you're starting to feel quite strong emotions, we can try and use some of those like breathing techniques or kind of pause to recenter ourselves. Or if this isn't working, then it might just be better to stop the conversation and then arrange to continue another time when that emotion has reduced. Another important thing to kind of bear in mind is that the person leading the conversation, as the person leading that conversation, you might feel quite stressed going into it, knowing what you've got to say and how you're, worrying about how the other person is going to respond. As you say everything that you need to say, your stress levels can start to decrease. However, the other person's stress levels might actually start to increase as they're participating, especially if they didn't know what was coming. So it's important to kind of be aware that your stress levels might not be the same at any one time. So, look out for any kind of indication which might be kind of obvious or might be a bit more subtle, that the other person is kind of feeling confused, distressed, anxious, fatigued, or they're just struggling to process. We want that conversation to be as collaborative as possible, and those feelings might not be conducive to doing that. So they might need to take a break or reschedule completely. As we were discussing about that reflection, it's really important to kind of acknowledge the feelings that they're showing you to help them feel validated and listened to. And sometimes as well, it's also really appropriate to use silence. Sometimes that's what people need to process what's being said. So kind of, I know it feels quite uncomfortable when there's silence, but it's also a good way of kind of respecting what people might need. So hopefully that all feels okay. I'm going to do a very quick exercise with you now. Hopefully one of the things that you're picking up from everything I've said so far is that a key thing around difficult conversations is to be empathetic. So think about other people's points of view, acknowledging their feelings and kind of monitoring their responses. So hopefully this exercise will work. It doesn't always, but I won't actually really know because you're kind of mostly off camera. So you can lie to me and tell me it's fine. So I'm going to just hopefully will highlight the importance of empathy. So if you are talking about yourself, and you are making a gesture towards yourself or you point towards yourself, do that now. So, you know, if you were going to point to yourself and say, I'm talking about me, I don't want to do it because I don't want to influence you. So, but yeah, if you just do that now in your own private space, I won't even know if you've done it, so you can lie to me. And then once you've done that, if you think about when you're feeling an emotion, point to where you feel that emotion. So if you're feeling happy, sad, or angry, wherever it might be, where in the body do you feel it? Okay. So I mean, it doesn't always work because humans are just not predictable people, but I'm guessing that quite a few of you pointed to kind of the same place in your body for both yourself and where you feel emotions. So this exercise is basically designed to show you that quite often we perceive ourselves and our emotions to be kind of one and the same. We feel our emotions really deeply and they often feel like they're part of us. We respond to them sometimes completely unthinkingly, and therefore they quite often drive our behavior. So if we can empathize with the emotions that other people are feeling, it can help us understand better what's driving their behavior. And one of the reasons that we can sometimes struggle to be successful in these kind of conversations is that we have a tendency to focus on what we perceive the other person has done wrong, and how it's impacting us and affecting our needs. And we can sometimes forget that the other person will also have emotions attached to the situation that need to be heard and validated. And when we're anxious about having a difficult conversation, we might feel a need to kind of rush our way through it, saying everything that we need to say and expressing how we feel. We kind of go in all guns blazing with an urgency to kind of fix the situation without actually hearing what the other person has to say. We also have kind of cognitive biases, which mean that we tend to focus on our own feelings, emotions, and beliefs. It's a very human thing to do, and we forget that other people's thoughts, feelings, and emotions are important as well. We can often dismiss that another person's feelings and kind of focus on the problem and the issues that it's causing. Now, this is completely unconscious usually, and it's not malicious, but it does highlight the need to be aware of this and understand that it's important to the success of the conversation to kind of acknowledge the other person's perspective and give them space to have their voice heard. Okay, so sorry, that was quite a lot of information, so hopefully you followed all of that. This is a very, very silly, quick video to just kind of give you a bit of a funny perspective around the importance of empathy and how it's very different to kind of just waiting for your turn to speak. Now, again, hopefully the sound works. Please let me know if not. And it is taken straight off YouTube, so there might be an ad now. I will skip through it as soon as possible. There we go.
Play. 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 Play.
What are you doing?
Trying to use a Jedi.
Oh, sorry.
Build a website you love
Sorry.
with Wix.
I'll try again.
For your words,
There we go.
Play. 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 Play.
What are you doing?
Trying to use a Jedi mind trick to control Stephen Hawking. Play. Play. Ugh. He must be wearing a tinfoil hat or something.
I did a bad thing.
Does it affect me?
No.
Then suffer in silence. Play. Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking.
Penny started taking a class. She wrote a paper. She didn't want me to read it. I went behind her back. I read it anyway.
Stephen Hawking hates me.
I don't know what to do. The paper's terrible. But if I tell her, she'll know that I read it, and she'll get really mad.
I was beating him so bad he doesn't want to be friends anymore. Why does everyone love me except Stephen Hawking?
Is it possible we're having two different conversations?
How would I know? I'm not listening to you.
Hang on. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Chess clock. We each get 5 minutes to talk about our problems. We'll take turns. Each turn will consist of a statement and a helpful response from the friend. Begin.
I humiliated Stephen Hawking in a game of words with friends. He stopped playing, and now we're not friends anymore.
He's probably busy. You're worried about nothing. Give it a couple more days. I'm sure he'll play, and you'll see that everything's fine. My turn. I can't let Penny hand in a bad paper, but how do I tell her it's bad without letting her know that I read it?
Beats me. Now, I know Hawking's not busy because I can see he's playing other people right now.
Maybe since you're so good, he's taking his time to meet the challenge. I want Penny to enjoy it.
Wallace told me he's a big baby. I didn't know that, and I played Extract for 82 points. Oh, it's all Amy's fault. She told me to play it. I've got to cut her loose.
Sheldon, I wasn't done talking. She hands in the paper tomorrow. I know I could help her, and she's my girlfriend. I should be allowed to help her. Why aren't I allowed to help her?
Yeah, I hear you, brother.
You need to give me some advice.
Fine. Women, huh?
No. Specific to my situation.
Blonde women, huh?
Empathetic.
It sucks to be you.
I quit.
Leonard, wait. No. I listen to your dumb thing. Leonard, come back. Leonard, come back.
What?
Oh, of course. It only works on the weak-minded.
Okay, it's a bit of an extreme example, but obviously, hopefully, you can kind of see that it's the difference between kind of genuine empathy and active listening, and then just sort of waiting for your turn to speak. Okay, so the last section of the tips around conversations is resolve. The first part of this is problem solving. So at this point, you should have established some genuine connection with the other person. You've both had opportunity to kind of share your perspective, and you're hopefully both feeling quite validated and listened to. So now is the time to kind of look at solving the problem together. You're not looking to kind of win the conversation. You're looking for solutions. So you want to use some common ground to really reach a resolution that you're both happy with. So it's not just about you kind of getting your way, thinking back to those kind of outcomes when we were talking about compromises that you can make. This is about kind of reaching a resolution that you both kind of feel happy with. So it should be a mutual task, and you should both be participating. And you should both have the opportunity to kind of contribute to potential solutions. Remember, as I said as well, that you should offer help and support to help achieve that outcome. So, how can I best help you to put this into practice? And be aware as well that you might not be able to solve all of the issues in one conversation as much as we'd really like to. Sometimes it is much more complicated. So look at this as a bit of a process that might take several conversations. And then the final tip that we have is to action plan. So this is kind of your roadmap of how you would take things forward. And that should include actions that you're both taking on, as well as timelines for when you expect to sort of see actions completed, changes made, or follow-up conversations planned. So this plan should form the basis of follow-up conversations, which you should plan to be having as well. It's a good idea to kind of agree when you'll meet again to discuss how those actions that you've implemented are working or not, and if they're kind of effective in resolving the situation. So don't just assume that because you've seen positive changes that that action is definitely working for the other person. It might actually it might be having a positive impact, but actually a detrimental effect on them. So it's good to check in and make sure that it's still working for them. And you want to ensure that any actions that are being taken on will lead to that sustained change. So obviously, if it's having a detrimental impact on them, then it's less likely that they're going to keep kind of carrying out that behaviour. And remember again that this might not be a simple fix. It might think of that as a process that might take several conversations before you see a resolution. And if you do see changes as part of your conversation, don't forget to feed that back. Let the person know that you've seen the change and thank them for it. This will hopefully kind of encourage them to continue the behaviour going forward. Okay, so we also are really aware that this is not likely to be anything new. You probably already have a lot of skills and approaches that you're using already. The nature of the work that we do means that you probably have all sorts of skills that this is all resonating with, and it means that you already have a lot of approaches that you can apply to this situation. So just as to highlight a few, as I say, skills from your roles, your previous roles, operational skills, and so on that you might have can also be applied here. Procedural justice, if you're familiar with it, and I'm going to again share a lot of resources around that. Being aware of bias and lots of other things, I'm sure that you can all kind of think of lots of things that people have told us during these workshops, things like motivational interviewing, 5-minute intervention skills. These all can be applied to this context. It's just kind of remembering to use them, especially when it feels quite an emotive situation. Okay, so the last thing I kind of just want to do with you is that this is kind of around the next step. So research shows that however well intended we are, kind of putting skills and knowledge that we learn in a kind of training event like this into kind of real world settings doesn't always happen. And there's lots of reason for that. Busy workloads, little time to kind of pause and reflect, and we rush from one thing to another. If you think about training you completed a year ago, it can be kind of hard to remember a lot of it, even though you might have thought it was really good. So evidence sort of suggests that setting ourselves really concrete goals, and this is kind of referring back to those behavioural intentions that I was telling you about earlier, that can kind of help us kind of commit to making some changes. So if you kind of think about, what kind of conversations you might have coming up in a couple of weeks, how can you kind of consciously apply these steps? So maybe just if you feel up to writing it down in the chat, or if you want to come off on camera to tell me, that would be lovely. But one thing that you might like to take forward from this session today would be lovely to hear about, if anyone's happy to share. Hi, Nina.
Hi. Thank you so much for that. Was really engaging. I really enjoyed all the little clips. They were really funny. They were really funny, and the cartoon. I just love your presentation style.
Oh, thank you.
And I think you got through a huge amount and kept lots of conversation flowing. And it's given me kind of a motivation to address something that has been stressing me out, by kind of thinking through it step by step like you presented. So it's become this kind of big thing in my head of like fear and, oh no, it's going to change things.
Yeah.
But actually the way you presented it is like, actually, I'm going to do it when we next see each other in person. I'm going to share a little bit, but not much, about kind of how I feel and what I've noticed, and then hand it over and just be prepared. And then as a coach, I do a lot of paraphrasing and stuff. So I'm going to remind myself, like, no, you are able to listen, you are able to paraphrase, you are able to kind of ask good questions, and just kind of focus on the steps rather than the fear of it.
Fab. Thank you so much for sharing, Nina. That's lovely. And a lovely illustration of, like I was saying, the skills that you've already got. You've got coaching
Yeah.
skills, you know how to do that. So it's just applying it in this context, which can feel really scary, can't it? But that's lovely to hear that you're going to take some of this forward. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Teresa, would you like to come in, Teresa?
Yeah, I was just reflecting on something you said quite early on in the conversation around acknowledging what you're feeling to engage the part of the brain that will then
Yeah.
like be logic. And
Yeah.
it's not something I've often thought, oh, they're gonna feel this, and I know what the feeling is, but I haven't done anything beyond acknowledging that. So I
Yeah.
think a practice for me will be to take that kind of next step and implement, kind of some of what was said here. And I think what I'll, kind of be looking forward to when we get the kind of the whatever we get from insights when they share this information back to us,
Sure.
because I can give it some proper like reflection time and maybe share some of it with my team as well.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really
Right.
great to hear. Yeah, labeling is what you're referring to. So
Yes.
naming our emotions. So yeah, it's a bit of a skill. I think you have to get used to doing it. We're not very used to doing it. But there are I know that there's a few apps that you can get that kind of ask you to check in daily, and you can kind of choose from a range of different emotions to kind of monitor, kind of record how you're feeling. There's also, I think it's called like the emotions wheel or something like that,
Yeah.
kind of gives lots of emotions to choose from as well. So I think we're not great at always recognizing exactly what the feeling is that we've got. So yeah, absolutely, that's lovely to hear. Thank you, Teresa, for sharing. And I can.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I can see there's a couple of things in the chat as well. So Sophie, yeah, collaboration aspects, difficult conversation being a mutual thing. They're brilliant. I'm glad to hear that. And Richard, thank you for sharing too about listening closely and empathizing. Fantastic. Well, hopefully everyone's kind of managed to get a little bit of something out of today. As I said, there are a couple of extra resources. So I don't know how familiar people are with the evidence-based practice resource catalogue, but there's all sorts of things on there, including about having difficult conversations, but also about resilience, so touching on the kind of well-being techniques that I talked about, and various other different bits and pieces, procedural justice, all that kind of stuff. You can also contact the functional mailbox, which is there, evidence@justice.gov.uk, and that you can be added to our mailing list. So you can get our kind of updates when they come through. Or if you have any other queries about, kind of the evidence behind certain things that you've got issues with, or you need to know about, outside of difficult conversations or anything like that, just anything about evidence, you can contact us as well. And I did write a blog on this, which is on the Insights website, which basically is another summary of this format. So just very quick overview. And there's also a video on there as well, if people kind of like that format to kind of take into account any new information. I think that sometimes people quite like those videos as well, don't they? So any other questions before I finish up? But it's been really lovely to share the morning with you.